Okay, another person just joined. That's good. So now we're recording, and I'd like to introduce Charles and Romy from Bonhams to tell us about their work and give us any advice. Talk to you.
Good evening, everybody, and thank you very much for asking us to come and have a chat to you this evening. Obviously, working for a fine art auction house is a well-trodden career path for many people who've studied history of art, and so it's obviously a great chance to me to talk to you. Just at the moment, my mobile is already ringing, so technology being confused, we'll hide that. But yeah, so I was just going to say what we do at Bonhams and just give you all an idea of how what you've done can be turned into a business form, and you can go out into the big world and make money, or some money, if given a fair wind. Right. As I say, I'm Charles. Romy, who she's just done your course, but she can explain about that a bit more. And we're just going to share a few images with you, and then so that you can sort of see roughly what we're talking about. At Bonhams, we're auctioneers and valuers. So primarily, what we do is hold auctions of one thing or one form or another in Scotland, where we normally just concentrate on paintings, along with whiskey, and we also do sort of single owner sales, specialist sales for complete house contents as well. We hold a lot of valuation days where we invite members of the public to come in, and sometimes it's ourselves, sometimes it's other specialists in one form or another who take part in these events. The world that we live in, where we're putting art in front of people, where we're trying to translate, the work that we've studied into getting a monetary value for it, and that means we need to have people to come in and look at the events with a view to actually buying and selling them, rather unlike a sort of National Gallery or whatever. We're needing people to actually put money down for the item. So we need to get people into our building, and so we hold a lot of private views in advance of an auction. Fairs, well, they also very important and integral part of us promoting what we do to the wider community, and acquiring items for us to hold. And then so sort of the press, again, for any of you out there who don't want to sort of put yourself out there in front of the public, there are other opportunities, but I think being an auctioneer and valuer is a great chance of mixing the wonderful world of handling paintings or other or decorative arts, the fine and decorative arts, and we need the press and advertising to promote our wares. How did I get into this business? Well, I actually studied auctioneering, valuing the fine arts. So I'm actually a chartered surveyor, but on the fine arts side. Other chartered surveyors, sell houses or sort of general surveyors, but I'm a member of the Royal Institute of Chartered Surveyors, and I've worked as a general valuer and auctioneer all my life. Been Bonhams 16 years, and I was also with Christie's and ran a small sale room as well for a number of years as well. So I work with colleagues who are specialists at the head of their field in different aspects of paintings, whether they be old masters or contemporary or impressionists or Australian or African or American, or as well as specialists in different decorative arts fields, whether it be sort of Chinese or furniture or jewelry, wine, anything. Bonhams, along with some other auction houses, we sell all manner of bits and pieces. So, after you've done your course, you've graduated, you might not necessarily be looking at paintings. You might be certainly if you join a fine art auction house, you can sort of migrate and use your knowledge and transfer it to porcelain, for example. And it's not a very big jump to learn about the early porcelain factories and how they developed and go on. Anyway, I'm going to let Romy talk a bit about herself now.
Romy. I was on the History of Art course last year. I graduated in June 2019, so I know how it's quite daunting to decide what you want to do or like how you're going to get a job. But there's light at the end of the tunnel, because I'm an example of someone who graduated and got a job. But really, I focused on, while I was at uni, was getting as much experience as I possibly could in the different sectors, whether it was in art galleries or auction houses, just to see them all and see how they all run. So when I was in my final year and fourth year, I came into Bonhams and did some viewing staff, which is when you invigilate the sale room before an auction and the run up to the auction and on the day of the auction. After that, I then graduated and they were looking for a receptionist position. So I was very lucky to get that role. And it isn't just a receptionist position. There's a lot more to the side of reception. But one of my favorite aspects of it was that sitting in the front desk, you get to see a whole wide variety of items. Studying history of art, I mainly knew about paintings, but I got to see some lovely jewellery and ceramics, and people just come in with amazing stuff that they have in their house, and also some other things which maybe aren't as quite high value, but it's so interesting to actually get to physically see all the items coming in. And there's lots to do with client services, and you get a really good overview of all the clients across the whole company in all the different sectors, whether that's furniture, paintings, jewellery. So you really get to know all the clients, which is obviously quite an important aspect. I then also had to deal with accounts and invoicing clients and things. So there was a lot of that side of it. But again, I enjoy the days of when we actually have sales and auctions are being held. I have to be a clerk. So that's when you note down every single bid that's happening in the sale room. So it's quite a time pressured and high pressured job, but it's also really interesting to be in the sale room and away from the reception desk. And I have to do organise telephone bids for all the staff members, and I've had to do a few telephone bids during the pandemic when we had auctions behind closed doors. I had got to help with that, which was really interesting. And then so I've been on reception for a year, and then I have now progressed again into more of administration, and also I get to do 1 day a week in the picture department. So I'm slowly beginning to see progression within the past year, from going from doing staff, reception, administrator, and now into the picture department 1 day a week. So there is a progression, which is great to be able to see. And in the picture department, I'm helping already with condition reports and researching paintings, and I get to have some day trips. So we attended an exhibition at the City Arts Centre just last week of Hornell's artwork, which was really interesting. And it's good to be able to get out of the office and see other examples of paintings. And then, as well as all of that, another highlight of the role for me is helping with press calls. And whether that's in the office, on the week of sales, we have generally on the Monday, if the sales on the Wednesday or the Thursday, we have a bunch of press come in and take photographs of all the high value items. So that's really interesting. And then also we've done a few remotely as well, which we'll show later on in this presentation. But yes, that's how I got from being a history of art student into the actual art market and into the art world, which is really interesting.
As Romy says, it's a well-trod path, either starting as a porter or starting on the front desk of an auction house, and then sort of gradually working your way up. And sometimes you just have to wait till a vacancy comes available and you step into it, really. Certainly with the bigger auction houses, that's generally how it goes. But if you're certainly looking to go into the fine art world for an auction house, yeah, a foot over the threshold is a good idea, and it can you then get to see the jobs coming up first before anybody else does. So it's certainly a good thing to do. I'm going to now basically just talk about some of the fun aspects of our job, and really sort of explain what we do. And it's not just about paintings, and we sell whiskey. And the first sort of slide there that I've put up is a bottle of whiskey that you'll see that we've sold for a rather large amount of money. Why was it so valuable, a bottle of whiskey? Well, this particular bottle came from a cask that was distilled in 1926, and it was bottled in 1986, so after 60 years. Macallan knew that they had something quite interesting, a few years before. I think they'd forgotten about this cask, because in the 1920s, most of their whiskey went to be blended, because there wasn't any single malts back in those days. It was all blended. And they found this cask, and they kept it, and then they did a special presentation of getting some of the couple of artists well known at the time to design the label. And the label that you see on that bottle was designed by an artist called Valerio Adami, and he's a popular Italian artist, and the Italians were actually buying an awful lot of Scottish whiskey. So this is one of the reasons why he did this. He designed 12 labels, and another 12 labels were designed by Sir Peter Blake of Sergeant Pepper's fame. Because you all know that. And then he designed another 12 bottles, and we sold couple of these bottles in our Hong Kong sale room. And then somebody in this country down in the south of England said, "Oh, I've got one of those bottles." And so we sold this one, say, a couple of years ago now. And actually, this record has now been broken again since we sold this. So it is incredible, and it's brought on a great big rush of buying and acquiring whiskey. A lot of it goes to the Far East, but it's not just the Far East. We have collectors in this country and elsewhere, but some of it is at more of a modest level. It's a few £100 or a few thousand, but so you can buy it, and we obviously like people to drink the bottles, because then they come back and buy more, but not necessarily the case. Jewelry, yeah. And if that's your thing, jewelry is certainly what a lot of auction houses take very, very seriously. And if you do decide to go into the fine art world and use your artistic temperaments or whatever to study jewelry, you'd probably need to go and retrain and get your gemology exams. But people who have joined us at Bonham, certainly, we've actually partly sponsored their exam fees when they've chosen to do that. So it's if you're like to mingle the arts and the science, because jewelry is actually very, very scientific. You're studying a lot about the rocks and the and other aspects, I suppose, and it is a fascinating world. It's probably one area where I must admit I try and stay clear of. Obviously, we all like looking at these pretty things, but they are very technical, and when they're valued or can sell for £500,000, certainly very, very serious. I'm going to hand you over now to Romy to talk a little bit about something that we're beginning to coming up for our sale next year.
Yes, so next year at the beginning of 24th of February, actually, we are doing a house sale of Dunrobin Castle. And it's mainly just the attic and the outhouses that we're selling from the castle, which is up in the east coast of Scotland. But with the clients, we're also selling some items from a flat they had in London, as well as on the west coast, a house they have there. So we're combining 3 different houses, and whether it's London, west coast and east coast, and it's all going to be sold in our Edinburgh sale room. And with a house sale, it's really interesting. This is the first one that I've really been involved in more so than before. So you get to see all the items to begin with. Clients, our specialists go up to the house and they view all the items, they photograph it all up there, and they then come back, write up a valuation and estimate how much we think everything will go to, with a high and a low estimate. And then that gets pitched to the client. We then got chosen to host the sales. So everything then needs to be brought down to our Edinburgh sale room or up from London. And again, then everything gets photographed, everything has to be catalogued, everything has to be lotted with a lot ticket, so we know where everything is. And then most things will then have condition reports, and we'll then have a nice printed catalogue, which we'll be able to hand out to clients. And with a house sale, it's really interesting because it's not just a one sale of paintings or one sale of whiskey. It's a lot more interesting because you see a huge variety of items, whether it's kitchenware or old frames, paintings, anything really, furniture. So it all comes together in one big sale. And then that also pulls in a huge number of different buyers and clients, as there's so many different things for them to see. So this is, as I say, in February, so it'll be a really good project to work towards in December, and coming back after Christmas in January. We've got that to focus on. But yes, that should be really interesting. And yeah, it's good to meet all the clients and things.
Yeah, so you certainly come in with a view for that sales on and have a look. Now, I'm conscious that we're probably taking up far too much of your valuable time, but I'll quickly run through other departments. Bond was very big on motor cars. The car there, she sort of gives the price, but I went to do a valuation for a client, and he said, "Do you sell cars?" And I said, "Well, yeah, we do." And he took me out to the garage to have a look at this thing that had been, there's only few years ago that we sold this, and it'd been sitting for about 15 years under a blanket, and it was looking a bit tired and things. And it transpires that they only made 200 of these cars, so hence the RS 200, and they were very sporty, and they were used for rallying at the day. And this chap had one anyway. Transpired it sold for rather a lot of money. So again, it's a part of the job where if you are in an auction house, as Romy says, you travel a little bit. You were there. You have to go around and visit all these people in their smart houses around the world. Literally, my colleagues go to have a look at the things that they have. So I know my colleagues in the south of London are jumping on and off aeroplanes all the time. Well, they were last year, maybe not so much this year, I'm afraid. Like everything, it's all changing a little bit this year. But actually, that brings back to another point I was going to mention, the fact that when I sort of had a lecture saying how when you start in work, everything changes. And I thought, doing the job that I was doing, how could valuing antiques possibly change? But certainly this year's brought it home very much, that how quickly it all could change. We've also got a painting here by the artist William Dobson. A lot of you may well know Dobson, but anyway, he was the first artist to basically have royal patronage. He was called the most excellent painter that England has ever had. I mean, at his day, he was the court painter for Charles II. He took over after Van Dyck in December 1941, and this self-portrait was done before he became a member of the court. And he did one of himself, one of his wife, and they're just absolutely stunning paintings. And they went on and made rather more than we expected them to. But actually, if you compare them to the Impressionist world or anything like that, you know, maybe not a lot of money, but we were very pleased with the way it went. Now, Chinese art, again, that's a very, very big area. Jade is valued in a similar way as we value diamonds, I suppose. I mean, very, very precious material in the Far East, and anything that is top quality, rare jade is highly, highly prized and sought after. And as you can see, this item went on and sold for rather a lot of money. This came from a house up in Aberdeen that I saw. I was looking at the whole contents of it, and there was one shelf of jades, and I think that this made more than the house was worth. I think this one shelf of jades. So very, very exciting to be involved with that. Now, we're just going to quickly flick on, because I know, say, we're taking up too much time, but I'll let Romy mention what we're up to here.
So as I said, we do a lot of press calls, and whether that's in the office or remotely. Charles and I recently went up to Taymouth Castle with this huge painting you see Charles holding, and the castle in the background, and then Charles and I are holding the chairs as well. So we took it all the way up there, and it was a successful day, and the chairs made good prices at auction. But on the other side of it, unfortunately, the painting, even though we went to huge effort of, I think it was about a 2-hour drive, an hour and a half drive up there, it unfortunately didn't sell. So you can try and push a piece of art as much as you possibly can, but if there isn't one person or 2 people out there that want it, unfortunately it can go unsold. But we do try our best and try and get as much press coverage as possible. And then here's just a slide of myself and all the other different things we sell and the different coverage we get. I think papers quite enjoy having pictures like these to brighten up the newspapers, especially with COVID times. So we do get some good coverage, and obviously we had to wear masks during COVID. But yes, so that's just a wee overview of our press calls. But we also have an Instagram page that we would love you guys to follow, and if you're interested in the art and what we sell, then please give us a follow. It's Bonhams Scotland. It's just a relatively new account, so we're still building it up, but it'd be great if you all can follow it, and if you're interested, that would be fantastic.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Over to you for questions.
Yeah, so we'll do questions for everyone at the end, but thank you both so much. That's really enlightening and very exciting. Now I'd like to introduce Candace Jones, who's the chair of Global Creative Enterprise at the University of Edinburgh. So you're welcome to join and tell us a bit about what you do and how students can improve their skills.
Oh, perfect. Thank you so much for having me. I apologize for that message sent to everybody. I sort of misunderstood, and so I can't stay till 7. So I was apologizing for that to everyone. I teach a course at the undergraduate level called The Art of Business and the Business of Art. And so we do a very focused overview of creative industries, markets, pricing, IP law. So a general overview, and then we usually do some kind of a client consulting project engaged with that. So we've worked with Historic Environment Scotland, Edinburgh International Festival. And so that's what I teach. My area is the creative industry. And so what I would like to talk about is tonight a little bit about some of the things that are pushing in terms of art markets and what's sort of coming up in terms of some interesting dynamics, especially with blockchain and digital, that may reshape or have some influence on the market. And so my goal is really just to bring some ideas and thoughts from the creative industries and apply them more specifically to the art market. I've also overseen some undergraduate thesis on art market. One of them is what creates valuations in paintings. So I will just share my screen now, and I will have to switch into screen mode, and hopefully you can all see this. And I will actually, I'm trying to move the screen so I can actually go into, there we go, into view mode. So my goal here is, I said, is a conversation. There are a lot of experts and people very well-versed and very interested in the art market context. So I want to engage in dialogue. I'm just going to translate some key ideas. I want to really have us have a conversation. And so I'm going to try and be relatively brief because I really want the goal to be a dialogue among us. Now, the key idea I think that's really important in terms of understanding from a business model perspective or a business perspective to auction houses and galleries is the notion of gatekeeping. That is, gatekeepers are key in markets that are characterized by excess supply. That is, there are lots of potential paintings that can go onto the market, and whether or not they sell depends on who is out there. And I think the last example that Romy gave is excellent because there's a certain amount of demand uncertainty. You just don't know who is going to want to buy that particular kind of painting. And there's also shifts, and it's socially defined about what makes a good painting. I mean, painters artists can fall in and out of fashion, and that can change the price valuation. So that's something very interesting as well. One of the key issues is really, I think, focusing on needing a good reputation in terms of doing art markets for quality. And that means people who can select what's important and viable and see something that will somebody else will value and be willing to pay for it. There's also a certain amount of issues about restricting choice by limiting who and what is seen in the market. That's what an art market, also an art auction, can also do. And it can also ensure that the artist paid up front regardless of future consumption. So in the art market, oftentimes what happens, this really key issue, is the artist can lose out on the future value of a painting. That is, they give up their right to the property once the painting is sold. And when it resells, sometimes for substantially more, they oftentimes don't get any value for that. In other markets, artists can collect royalties. So that's sort of where I'm going to talk to you about some of the technology and that's coming about primarily oftentimes by artists to try and do that. So what I want you to call your attention back to, I'm not going to play the video here, but this was Banksy and him shredding his particular painting. And this caused quite a roar, as you might imagine, in the art world, because as soon as the auction had completed the transaction and the bidder and the price had been settled, as soon as the gavel went down, the painting then started to shred and people were just horrified. And one of the key questions was, what in the heck is going to happen to the value of this painting now that Banksy, at the time we didn't know it was Banksy, but Banksy himself put the shredder in the frame and shredded the painting. Now, luckily for, I guess, the owner and the person who had bid on it and paid for it, he was perfectly happy. He thought that that was a Banksy kind of trick, and that actually didn't affect the valuation. I mean, I guess we'll see in time if that happens. There are different kinds of gatekeeping. One of them is a tastemaker, and that's usually art critics and social influences who actually create dialogue around whether or not a picture is valuable and how it helps add to what we understand. It also can help evaluate the creative product. There's our co-producers, those are galleries and dealers who help shepherd an artist and their products through a production process. For many artists, it might be helping them shape the content of cultural product, spotlighting their work, helping them develop their careers. And then there's search and selection, which is oftentimes museum curators and auction houses, which really focus on solving a matching problem. That is, whether it's active venues or a painting to a particular collector, that's sort of the role, is as sort of this intermediary. And they really also, a key issue in auction houses in the art market is to verify provenance. That is assuring that something is authentic and there's the property rights are aligned such that when you buy that painting or that piece, that you actually own it and that you have the right to have it once you have paid for it. There are issues in art markets where oftentimes the provenance can become quite contested. So this is a painting that was sold as a Frans Hals that sold for 8.4 million. And now it headed to court over allegations of forgery. And so the issue is, how then do you ensure provenance? And that's obviously one of the key roles which our guests can speak about more knowledgeably than I can, is what does that process look like in an auction house, and how then do they ensure that what is sold is authentic to the client? And it basically means that it demonstrates who created and owned the product. It helps shapes perceptions of authenticity and value. So this is a case in which if you buy something that you think is an authentic Frans Hals and it turns out to actually be a copy, then the value of that painting for you as the owner will drop dramatically. One of the key challenges or interesting issues coming up now is in digital products, and blockchains are increasingly being used as a solution to provenance and authenticity. I'm going to talk briefly about this because they're now starting to attach a material, and they're now attaching RFDs to art objects or embedding them actually into digital art such that the ownership can be traced. So a blockchain creates a digital code that is into the object itself. And then every time that object change hands, there's a record of it that is collectively held and can be verified. And so there's a really fascinating, if you want to, PBS NewsHour that's about 30 minutes, and that it really talks very concretely about how blockchain technology is starting to be used, especially in digital art and also in paintings, to trace the authenticity and create provenance. So in fact, digital artists are starting to use blockchain to embed code into the digital art such that it can be the reselling of their piece can be traced. And one of the reasons they want to do this is from a very pragmatic perspective, is that they can then start to claim potentially some future royalty or pricing that makes it easier to do. So a key question, obviously, is will this disintermediate the art market? So what will happen to auction houses if, in fact, a significant portion of paintings or products start using blockchain? So my thought is it may differ by the type or role of the gatekeeper. A gallery dealer is more likely to have a relational interaction with the artist, so they may be less likely to be disintermediated because they have concerns with career and sustainability, and they rely on repeated interactions. Our auction houses may be more transactional. They may have more limited concerns for artist's career, and may not as much, and may focus on the artist's future value in order to generate profits for the auction house. A key question becomes, and this is one of the things that's dealt with in that PBS NewsHour, is a fractional part of a painting or digital art, what is the value of that? I mean, it raises really interesting questions about, I mean, how do we attach value, and then how do we create fractions of value, and can you do that in digital art? So there are certain questions for using blockchain. One is if the decal is removed from the material painting, how is provenance actually created? For what types of artwork does blockchain work best? Is it new works, digital works? Can auction houses simply use blockchain to actually facilitate their process of provenance, and then have the record that's held in computer systems all over the world? What blockchain does is it tracks ownership. So will it create the right for royalties for future artists? That's a very important question. And that's indeed one of the reasons that artists are starting to want to use blockchain, is because they don't want to lose out on the value of, let's say they create a painting or a digital piece of art, it sells for £20,000 now, but in 5 years, it sells for £50,000. They want a piece of that increased value. There are limits to blockchain. I mean, it's a very energy intensive, all those computers, because the reason blockchain works is it's distributing the information system across millions of computers, and it requires access to computers and advanced technologies. So it's a really interesting we're on the interesting point of a threshold about how and whether this is actually going to change the nature of the art market itself. So that is, I can stop sharing my screen, and if I can figure out where in the heck I am now, and we can have a chat about it, but I was just trying to give you a more brief overview of, I'm trying to raise my picture here, stop share right there, okay. So I'm happy to have questions. I have a question for Charles and Romy at some point, but I would like to let other people have their questions first.
Yeah, Candace, thank you so much. It's incredibly interesting. And as someone who also makes art, and I'm taking a course on digital art right now, this is really interesting. I think we'll have our last speaker go, and then we can ask questions to the group, especially since a lot of your topics overlap. So thank you so much again. And now I'd like to introduce Apollonia, who is Edinburgh alumni, just graduated with a first, by the way, and is an aspiring solicitor and a friend of the society. So take it away, Apollonia.
There we go. Hello, guys. Thank you for that introduction and really, really interesting presentations from both previous speakers. So I am going to talk a bit more generally, not necessarily that much about the specific aspects of the art market and such, but rather what you as students can do to raise your profile within the kind of the business world and just generally the professional environment. So I myself grew up in a pretty artsy household. My parents are art dealers in Moscow. They have a gallery in Moscow, in Russia. I wrote my dissertation on Baba Yaga as a Russian fin de siècle book illustration hero. And I currently also work as a food photographer for a small startup. So it was quite a left turn for me to go into law suddenly. But I guess what I want to talk about here is how I came into that by assessing myself, my skills, ambitions, and experiences, and realizing that that's precisely what I want to do. And that's how I want to utilize my art history experience. I've always been quite fascinated with the legal side of art sales operations, as Candace had mentioned, IP, consignment deals, international art transactions. That all involves a lot of legal work. And that's always been fascinating to me. But it's been precisely kind of the assessment of myself through my previous experiences what led me to a legal path. So a lot of things I'm going to say today are going to sound a bit like they're coming out of the mouth of a law firm recruitment officer, but in fact, I think that they are applicable to many areas, and I think that they would be really useful to both business and art history students. It is actually quite a pity that these resources are not shared more widely outside of, say, business and law fairs. So at first, I want to talk to you about your transferable skills. This is kind of a buzzword that you'll probably hear over and over at the university from career services and such, but you really cannot underestimate it. I would like to invite you to assess yourself as a person and your experiences periodically. I really, really recommend kind of looking at your strengths and at your weakness. Well, I'm going to go into this SWOT analysis a bit later, but kind of really assess yourself professionally as a person, which would really help place yourself within the, say, the art market or whichever really market you want to go into from your business or art history experience, respectively. I really recommend, onto more practical skills, I really recommend keeping a diary or a document of the events that you went to. So events like this, for example, take notes, keep it in a sort of a document. The initiatives you participate in, if you do any art history, business student societies, if you do any other events, conferences, briefly note down what you've taken out of it, how you behaved in certain circumstances, what was the key information that you carried out, because now it might seem kind of clear during the event, but after the event, it might become a bit muddy. But to really, really apply these experiences, what you need is to kind of note them down and apply them to yourself in a way. So this is why I came to implementing sort of a SWOT analysis situation, a very basic, framework of analysis that usually is applied to businesses, but I think it's actually really helpful to apply that to yourself. So if you assess your personal strengths and weaknesses in a professional environment, that will make you so much more open to the opportunities that are out there and that you can see, such as events like this or events hosted by, say, other firms, advertising firms, marketing firms, auction houses, that you might apply your existing set of skills to. So inevitably, the more time you spend looking at your experiences at yourself as a person, the more you will notice about it and the more you will be able to apply it later. You would think that you'd need specific experiences, internships and such to enter the art world or to enter the art business world, but really there are ways to expand your skill set without working for free necessarily, which is a lot of internships and volunteering out there. So of course, if you have the opportunities to do that, if you have an opportunity to intern at a gallery or something, go for it. That's fantastic. But a lot of people don't. And that's where I want to bring up the point of diversification versus specialization. I think it's really important to develop a diverse set of, as you might realize, this is more like a career talk situation as an aspiring and starting early career, so to say, person myself. I think it would be really important to share these things. So if you work part-time jobs, say in a pub or a supermarket, and you think, well, the art world is something entirely separate, the art business is something entirely separate, or say art law, you might actually be wrong. I would really recommend you to extrapolate those skills from these experiences to extrapolate the communication skills, the customer service, the teamwork that you've developed there. Sometimes working in a pub can actually bring you more transferable skills and experiences than filing paperwork as a volunteer at a higher profile institution. Again, consider your personal assets. Do you feel like you might need some more communication experience? Seek an opportunity that would allow you to do that, whether it's working at a Marks and Spencer or, at an auction house. Employers are increasingly looking for well-rounded people with diverse experiences and backgrounds. And I cannot tell you the number of times that recruiters from various firms have gushed about brilliant applications written about someone's experience of working at McDonald's. And they're like, we have so many people who have direct legal experience, who have experience in this exact field. And yet we've gotten more brilliant applications from someone who worked at the McDonald's for 5 years, because they've really learned how to extrapolate those communication, customer service, teamwork skills. And this is what brings me to the STAR method, which might be, again, familiar, quite simple, but it might be familiar to a lot of you. It's mostly used in interviews, but I think you can really apply that to yourself and just to kind of assess yourself again periodically, what you've done. And you might find way more there than you thought you had. It really makes you value your experiences and see what exactly it is you've achieved in a certain situation. So the STAR method is situation, task, action, result. The situation is what, where, when, what happened, what was the situation, what were circumstances. The task is what was the problem, what had to be done by you to resolve the issue. Perhaps there was also an additional time constraint or a challenging circumstance, and include those in your analysis of your past experiences. An action is what steps and actions you specifically took to resolve that. And that really helps you assess your strengths and weaknesses there as a professional. And then the result was what it was that you achieved. So there, I really recommend stating for your own records, or if you're discussing this in a job interview, state numbers if possible. So state percentages, state numbers. So say if you were responsible for a membership situation at a society in the university, state by how many percent the membership increased, for example, that year compared to previous years. State the profit margins. State something very specific that you can anchor your analysis of your achievements in. That really helps. If you don't have that, however, if it's more abstract kind of, that is great as well. Then the next concept I'd like to discuss, which again, many law recruitment people really stress, is commercial awareness. But I do think that it applies to a lot of sectors. And is another buzzword, but again, very important. Be aware of the world around you. I know it's easy and actually quite enjoyable to get lost in the theory of things or to bury yourself deep in one topic. We, all art historians, we've done that. But I highly recommend keeping on top of the current economical, political, and commercial climate. So go on Twitter, go on LinkedIn, follow the news. Actually, universities have a free subscription to Financial Times, so check that out. I mean, I'm not suggesting that you read every Financial Times articles, they can be quite dense, but say if you take a Sunday breakdown that they do of the events of the week, go for that. Go on specialized websites. So say a law firm that has an art law department, like Mishcon de Reya, Freshfield, or something, they always have a news section covering recent events and developments. Institute of Art and Law is great as well. So as Candace has discussed earlier today, a variety of factors can impact your position within the art market, say the blockchain initiatives or like other fintech developments. And as well, I actually wanted to mention the Franz Hals thing is the case as well. But as you might have heard from, say, recent very loud news stories, one case in which Rijksmuseum was swindled out of a substantial sum of money through hacking, something that probably you as an actor in the art market might want to be aware of. The Franz Hals case, again, where it's mostly an issue of of contract law. But then if you compare that, for example, with another case where actually a buyer was sold a fake by an auction house, you would want to see, and there is like no possibility of rescission. Well, here the Franz Hals, actually the seller will have to pay Sotheby's for the basically back for the fake. So you see there from these kind of cases, you see who has the power in the market. You gain kind of more, even if it's more specific to law, you still gain kind of the commercial awareness of what's going on in the market, who has the power, where the power lies with the buyer, with the seller, whether it's a bigger auction house or a private collector. And these trends really will help you within the art market more generally. So as obvious as it sounds, global and local events do directly impact the functioning of all businesses, including art sales on every scale, smaller businesses, smaller galleries, from them to auction houses. And when you learn to navigate those trends in the economic landscape, you will be able to apply that knowledge to the development and assessment of your personal skills as well. So on to building skills rather than assessing your previous ones. I really, really, really recommend you to take every chance and opportunity to get. I'm not suggesting you're necessarily going, again, for unpaid internships, but rather say lectures, seminars, conferences. If you can do those, they're not, I mean, if you can do the free internships, they're not going to hurt, but it's not necessarily a system that we want to encourage. It's quite a contested ground right now in the art business, is whether interns should be paid or not. They should, but yeah, so go to seminars, symposiums, conferences, evening events, do your research, especially now that we have access to a significantly expanded range of online opportunities. Even if you're not that interested or knowledgeable about the topic, I still recommend going. For starters, there is a seminar series for art history in the department at Edinburgh. There is, I know there used to be or might be several lines of series of seminars in the business school that used to run. Even the simple act of showing up, of stepping out of your comfort zone with a topic that someone is an academic professional in and you've never heard about before, just stepping out of your comfort zone there and going to an academic or professional event, the subject of which you might not understand, is in itself a valuable experience. So I would really recommend expanding your scope of interest and finding out about the most recent and relevant topics in your and other fields. I think that is crucial to really becoming an active rather than a passive participant in the professional and academic world. So just like for a small reference, a lot of the courses that you're being taught, when they're developed, the plans for them are submitted way earlier than they're being taught. So as much as professors do try to keep on top of the news, keep on top of relevant topics, there is still always a tiny gap there between what you're being taught and what's actually happening in the world every day. Although, say, current events might be mentioned in lectures and such. So I really recommend for yourself to bridge that gap through raising your commercial awareness and through going to events and seizing the opportunities. There's always usually at talks, there's an opportunity to ask questions at the end, like today. A lot of the events also have networking or drinks receptions, even the online ones nowadays, just like ours does today. And let me tell you, so many of my professional connections were made at the drinks reception after a conference. So many, I cannot even describe it. So you really never know who you might meet or what you might unexpectedly learn for yourself. But having just come out of a talk or having heard an academic paper, you always have a free and available conversation starter, because you can always be, well, what do you think of the speaker? What do you think of this event? And then you kind of get the conversation going. I think the important thing here is to stay open to things, meet new people, explore new avenues. There's just an example. The first time I went to the Association for Art History conference as a second-year undergrad, it's probably one of the largest art history conferences on this side of the Atlantic, really. I have to say I felt a bit out of place. I remember being asked what my PhD topic research topic was. To which I kind of obliquely replied that my research interests lay in the field of, some of the things I tried saying the most complicated thing that I could think of at the time, something like fabrication of national identities and folkloric print culture in the fin de siècle Eastern Europe, which actually is something I went on to do, but in a bit simpler terms, just add a sprinkle of Foucault and you're good. Because undergrads simply don't go to those events, so they wouldn't even think that undergrads were at that event. And I heard papers about theoretical concepts I've never heard of before, probably wouldn't fully be able to explain now either. But a lunch and a drinks reception here, a Q&A after a panel there, and it became more and more of a comfortable and a familiar environment. And at one of the drinks receptions, our very own Carol Richardson introduced me to association management team, to the Association of Art History Management team. And we spoke about art history in the context of undergraduate studies, about generally the teaching of art history in the country. And this one talk led to the subsequent creation of the UK-wide student network for art history students. In March 2020, we were supposed to have the first UK research conference for history of art undergrad and postgrad students. Brilliant speakers, very high interest across the country, which was sadly cut short or didn't happen because of COVID, basically. But what I want to say here is basically that just even minor experiences, a seminar or a reception at a conference, can lead to effectively life-changing acquaintances and events. But you have to be there and you have to be ready to learn and communicate with people. And if we're speaking about art business or just business today, the key skills really are adaptability, communication, networking, be comfortable with going out of your comfort zone and talking to people, because that's really how you learn a lot of the information. Work-wise, there are a lot of firms participating in online internships right now, and a lot of opportunities have really actually opened up with COVID because of that. There's a lot of online internships and workshops that you don't even have to apply for necessarily, like you don't have to go through a whole CV process or anything. You just show up, and there is a platform, for example, Forge, where, is that in this slide? Sorry, don't quite see. Yeah, there, Forge. Where you just go and you complete tasks for a firm, basically. So you get to know the work at the firm a bit closer, but also you get to see, there is firms represented, anything from advertisement to law firms to marketing, fintech, and other companies that kind of put out a bit of information. It's almost like an online course that you can do. So I really recommend those, but then you just get a nice shiny addition to your CV as a result, and that can be bad. There are presentations done by all sorts of firms, from law to advertising themselves or through other initiatives, especially diversity initiatives are quite active right now. So for example, in law, I know there's aspiring solicitors, there's Queer Lawyers of Tomorrow, there's several initiatives that kind of let you into the professional world from a different angle. Like just this afternoon, I was watching a presentation by a diversity group in collaboration with a law firm on Instagram Live. I mean, firms are really adapting. There's obviously the good old method of cold CV sending and emailing people. You can always do that. The worst thing that can happen, you'll get a no or a silence. There are a lot of opportunities that are not necessarily advertised, but might be available to you. So if you just email someone like, do you have a job? Do you have an internship position? Do you have a job? They actually might say yes. It's happened to people I know. So not just a fairy tale. And go for the job that you think you're underqualified for. Just go for it. Again, the worst thing that can happen is a no or a silence. But also build your network. Email an academic whose article you liked, a recruiter from a firm you're interested in, connect with people and collect experiences. I kind of like to think of it as sort of a treasure chest that you're in possession of. Almost every experience in communication carries something valuable and ultimately usable, and just add that gem to your collection, analyze it a bit, analyze it under a microscope, make sure it's not fake, and you're good. So I think that this is it for today from me. I hope this makes you look back at yourself, your experience, and your ambitions with a fresh eye, and can't wait to meet you all in networking.
Great. Thank you so much, Apollonia. That was really helpful. And now we're going to bring it out to questions. So if you have a question for one of the speakers, just feel free to unmute yourself and then feel free to answer. So I know Caroline, I think you had a question, or some of you, the speakers might have questions for each other.
Yes, okay, this might be really silly, but it's something that just popped into my head. Romy and Charles, you mentioned that sometimes you'll get all sorts of things through the door, people wanting to sell all sorts of things. And I was just thinking, what is the extent of that? Do you get people bringing in things that, do you get people bringing in like shoes, boxes, lamps from IKEA, being like, is this worth anything? Like, or is it, do you try and like keep it to only specific objects?
Well, I remember a few years ago when I was at Christie's, you used to have to watch the Antiques Roadshow on a Sunday night, because on a Monday morning, people would come in with whatever was shown on the Antiques Roadshow the night before. It could be dolls or teddy bears or a bit of pottery or something. And, oh, I've got one the same. No, you don't, I'm afraid. It's not quite the same as that. So yeah, whatever's being perceived as being valuable, people will want to know about it. And because we are general valuers and cover all aspects, we get asked all these questions. I mean, it could be a medal, and just because one medal says exactly the same as another one, because the other one was owned by Winston Churchill, the other one's worth a lot more than the one you've got. And sometimes it's the provenance, it's the backstory, and not just the actual item itself that we're valuing. It's you're valuing the sort of something that's sort of perceived. And I've just been asked to do valuations yesterday, and there was a sort of, I don't know, maybe a fancy sword in there, but it's supposed to be wielded by somebody, an iconic Scottish warrior, and is it or is it not? It's a hypothesis, but yeah, what comes in, we value all sorts. And sometimes people walking off the street, or obviously now people email us bits and pieces to be looked at. And Romy, as first port of call, often gets a lot of these inquiries.